Our story begins in Midwich, a small town in California. It's the kind of place where nothing ever happens, and its residents must come up with something to do. That's how the annual festival began, and it's now the most anticipated event in the area. Today is July 1st, the big day. Everyone is gathered near the town hall in the morning, ready to kick off the festivities. But then, the activities are abruptly interrupted when the clock hits 10 o'clock. For no apparent reason, all of the Midwich residents collapse at the same time. The phenomenon affects everything within city limits. Even the animals are in some kind of coma. A man is behind the wheel when the thing hits the town, which causes a nasty crash followed by an explosion. Soon, people from the other towns begin to notice that something is terribly wrong. All kinds of experts are summoned, but no one can explain what happened. No chemicals or radioactivity of any sort is detected. They can't even collect samples or investigate it properly. Everyone who enters the city instantly drops to the ground like a burst balloon. Hazmat suits and oxygen masks are equally useless. Dr. Alan Chaffee is a resident of Midwich, but he was lucky to be out of town this morning, escaping the collective doom. Now he is worried about his wife, Barbara. He came back because she wasn't answering the phone. Just as suddenly as they fell, the victims regained consciousness at the same time. Exactly 4 p.m. Almost like a programmed outage. Now it's also safe to enter the town again. So Alan is finally reunited with his wife. The school principal, Jill, doesn't have the same luck with her spouse. The news about Mike's car crash devastates the poor woman. Time goes by and the Midwichers gradually resume their dull lives. Everyone is forced to accept the fact that this strange day will go unexplained, probably forever. That's when Alan begins to see a pattern among his patients. Just like his own wife, a bunch of women in town have fallen pregnant. When a shared trauma is put behind a specific community, a baby boom is not that weird, right? Sure. What is really weird is that estimated date of conception is July 1st for all of them. A woman named Callie is in the same situation, even though her husband has been overseas for almost a year. Before we go, yeah, Callie, nice try. We should tell you that among the mothers-to-be there is even a confirmed virgin. In a few days, it becomes obvious that all the women are simultaneously pregnant. The inevitable conclusion is that it must be a direct consequence of that blackout somehow. Because of that, many couples are inclined to interrupt the pregnancy and avoid dealing with these bunch of rosemary babies. But many others see no reason to do that. Although each one is free to make their decision, the divergent opinions keep causing arguments. As the ominous atmosphere gets heavier, each side is eager to transfer their guilt to the other one. At least that point is resolved soon enough. The renowned epidemiologist, Dr. Susan Werner, comes to town. Fascinated by the phenomenon, she is willing to move into this godforsaken town just to study it. That means she'll need as many of these creepy babies as possible. As her research is funded by the federal government, she offers $3,000 to every woman who agrees to keep that thing. So now we know what all those taxes are for. Great. Anyway, everyone accepts the bribery, and Midwich turns into an obstetrician's nightmare until next March. Then, about half the town goes into labor. But the resulting chaos is nothing compared to the babies themselves. What a creepy bunch. With the same skin tone and the same silver hair, these kids look like they were mass-produced rather than born. Susan Werner is assisting the deliveries, and she is in the room when one of them is pronounced dead. It's the only one who doesn't make it. Susan's behavior is a little odd then. She grabs the stillborn baby and quickly hides it in her car as if it were a bundle of illicit goods. For a few months, Midwich is a happy little town again. The families are so fond of their babies that everyone is ready to forget about the disturbing circumstances that brought them to life. Obviously, this idyllic state is very short-lived. As the children begin to develop, other peculiar events keep happening. Take poor Jill, for example, who's raising little David all by herself. His first achievements made her very proud, but it kind of catches her off guard when he spells David before he can even walk. Barbara and Alan have it even worse. Their daughter, Mara, is by far the weirdest kid. They try not to make a big deal out of it, but it gets harder with time. One day, her eyes turn bright green like a scary plushie, and she fixates them on her mother. Barbara suddenly begins to act very strangely, as if someone else is controlling her body. There's a pan with boiling water on the stove. Still in a catatonic state, she puts her whole hand inside it. The spell is broken when Jill comes to save her friend. Barbara is then rushed into hospital. It's difficult to prove that Mara was responsible, but it doesn't even matter. Fearing her own child makes Barbara so conflicted that she is plunged into depression and ends up taking her own life. So now Alan has a double ordeal, still mourning his wife while trying to raise the creature. Susan keeps track of all these incidents for many years, watching closely while the children grow up. She presents some of her results from time to time. The number of freak accidents in Midwich has been off the charts since the creepy kids were born, but it's very difficult to prove that they were intentional. Their existence as a group is the only thing that matters to these children. They also seem to operate like a hive mind, and their queen bee is Alan's daughter, Mara. That's probably because she is the one with greater abilities. Susan has reasons to believe that Mara can easily read people's minds, and her silver friends are learning to do the same. Since he lost Barbara, Alan has firmly kept his head buried in the ground, ignoring any signs that Mara might be dangerous. He doesn't care about Susan's study anymore and refuses to listen to logical arguments against his daughter. Still, she keeps insisting that he should be more involved in the research. Alan is a brilliant doctor, and she could really use some brains on her side, especially considering the obscenely high IQ of the creepy kids. At the age of 5, they begin to pair up between them. Jill's son, David, is the only kid who doesn't have a partner. As the others form a double line where each duo walks side by side, David walks alone behind them. No one understands what these weirdos want, but by now the whole town is used to obey them blindly. They have seen enough of those freaky accidents to know what happens to firm parents or tough tutors. The only adult who is not completely defenseless is Susan Werner. At this point, all of the kids are accomplished mind readers, but they can't access her thoughts. Even Mara is slightly surprised by her shielding techniques. That's surely a point for the grown-ups, but it also draws a target on the doctor's back. Their fast development is baffling even to specialists. Medical checkups are constantly ordered as an excuse to study these remarkable specimens. But it doesn't always end well for the physicians. An eye doctor hurts one of them by accident during one of those checkups. Unfortunately for the doctor, Mara is also in the room. She activates the plushy eyes again and makes the woman pour a bunch of chemicals into her own eyes. The doctor ends up in hospital, as many others before her. She will never be able to see again. That incident is the last straw for Jill, and she decides to talk to Alan. He listens to her because he knows that she loves David, just like he loves Mara. But it's impossible to deny that there is something terribly wrong with them. Jill thinks that they can change, and Alan is the right person to do it. She wants him to put together a special class for them. Alan points out that, in terms of intellect, he is a doorknob compared to them. But Jill says he can teach them how to be human. Her words have a deep effect on Alan. He realizes that the gory incidents and the vengeful tendencies don't even bother him that much. At least not compared to the real problem. Just like the rest of the Blackout offspring, Mara is cold and empty. She clearly feels no affection and no remorse whatsoever. Alan still struggles to admit it to himself. That night, Jill also has a disappointment. She is trying to break that silver wall between her and her son, but the boy can see what she's doing. He tells her that emotions are nothing but garbage, and they only get in the way of everything. But then he probes into Jill's mind and sees Mike. He realizes that she feels something about that man, and it's very similar to what he feels for that stillborn baby. In a way, David also lost someone. That's something that the other kids just can't relate or even imagine why it would matter. Jill's grief seems to be a common ground where David can bond with her. That's surely good news, but it might not be wise for David. Getting close to a non-silver individual is frowned upon by his peers. It makes him develop something that could evolve into a personality. When he suddenly breaks away from the pack and takes a new turn, the others stare in disbelief. He didn't even ask for Mara's permission. What is this little maverick up to? He goes to the cemetery to visit that baby girl who was supposed to be his soulmate. There's a woman sitting there and getting wasted. She is the baby's mother. Her loss made her hate all the silver children since that day. When she sees David, she is very rude to him. But she is doing that out of grief. And that is the one human emotion that David understands. Probably realizing that this is a great place to find more of it, the boy sticks around for a bit longer. Then, Alan arrives to visit Barbara's grave. He is surprised to see David without the usual entourage. Even more so when he tells Alan that he wanted to visit that baby. Nobody has told him or the others about the stillborn. Alan was still reluctant to accept the villagers' belief that these children can read minds, but he doesn't know what else could explain this. More important than that is David's significant change in attitude. He indicates that he understands what Alan is feeling and even holds his hand. That fills Alan's heart with hope for his own daughter. Maybe Jill is right after all. They are capable of learning how to feel. So he sets up a classroom for that peculiar group. Not wanting to sound rude on the first day, he avoids mentioning that the course is about being a person. He chooses a random science topic and starts talking about the 5 senses. Suddenly, the kids declare that the eyes are the windows to the soul. They say that in one voice, in the spookiest way possible. In fact, everything they do looks like rehearsed choreography. They probably agreed to lessons only to creep him out. The classes keep going without much progress. One day, Alan makes a serious mistake. He leaves them for a moment. Any elementary teacher knows what that means even with normal children. To make things worse, the janitor decides to come in. The man is totally drunk, and he makes no effort to hide his disgust for their kind. His words would hurt anyone's feelings, but the children remain unfazed. However, when he makes a move to physically hurt one of them, the group immediately takes action. The creepy plushy eyes strike again. Under their control, the janitor climbs a tall ladder and takes a nosedive, landing on his broomstick. Alan can't ignore that, but he doesn't want to interrupt the lessons either. His only choice is to use them to try and fix the problem. He finally agrees to team up with Susan Werner. Glad at his change of heart, she decides to share some confidential information with him. It turns out that Midwich is not even special. The blackout also happened in hundreds of other small towns all over the globe. Their women also got pregnant and gave birth at the same time. And their children are also scary as hell. Alan is shocked to hear that, but he fears Susan is not even telling him the whole truth. So she takes him to her secret lab and confesses what she did 5 years ago. She stole the body of David's soulmate, that stillborn baby. Her team has been working on it ever since, and eventually they had a breakthrough. The baby was reversed to its original form, and Alan is looking at it now. Susan describes it with a bunch of long words, but we know an alien when we see one, or at least we sure hope we do. Getting home, he sees Mara is packing her stuff. The Silver kids are moving in together. Their new home is a barn in the outskirts of the city. Mara gives him a list of supplies he is supposed to bring them as soon as possible. She refuses to ask any questions about her decision. In the morning, Alan can see that every parent had a similar conversation with their child last night. They are all too afraid to disobey them, so they just drop them off at the barn. Only one guy decides to come back. He insists on taking his daughter with him, but the group is too strong now. They don't have to tolerate this kind of insolence. The man is hypnotized and made to blow up his own car while still sitting inside. Meanwhile, Susan has awful news for Alan. The situation has escalated in other towns too, and the government is running out of options. They are going to nuke the whole town. They have to leave as soon as possible, or they'll go down with the kids too. Alan can't bring himself to leave his daughter behind, alien or not. He tries to turn the current lesson into a crash course on empathy, but it doesn't work. Mara repeats what David once said to his mother. Emotions are garbage. Only weak people have them. Alan tells them what's about to happen and begs them to change their ways. But Mara explains to him that it's much easier to leave and find another town to terrorize. She wraps up their chat with a second order for more supplies. Once he leaves, Mara finally addresses the issue with David, asking about that disgusting sentimental behavior he's been showing lately. The boy is saved by a deranged priest hidden in the bushes with a rifle. Mara thinks that's a more urgent threat, and the group focus on helping the priest with his aim. After that, they attack Susan as a group, and she can't stop them from scanning her thoughts. They find out about the stolen baby and force Susan to be her own little frog in the science class. That night, the people of Midwich finally decide they've had enough. It's not that easy to find a pitchfork for everyone, but the torches will do. They plan to burn down the kids' headquarters, which is that barn, but they fail miserably and get decimated instead. Realizing that he's running out of time, Alan tells Jill there is nothing more they can do for those kids. They simply have to go. If they don't, there will be more and more deaths until there's no one left. He locks her up to keep her safe while he goes to the barn with a case full of dynamite. Mara is uneasy to see her father. He is thinking of a solid brick wall, keeping an intense focus on the image. As a result, that brick wall is all Mara gets when she tries to read his mind. Jill has managed to escape the classroom by now, and she tries to save David. The other kids don't know about the explosives, and they don't want her to take away one of them. But the hive mind has its setbacks, it seems. They are unable to hypnotize two people at the same time. Mara decides to focus on her father, but it's too late when they find out the truth. The barn goes up in flames, and so does everyone inside it, including Alan and Mara. The only survivors are Jill and David. She decides to take him to a new city where no one has heard about the Silver Children. She knows that David himself is still a great risk to mankind in general, but she thinks he deserves a chance, and she also wants to leave a little room for a sequel. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 1995 movie Village of the Damned by Alphaville Films, starring Christopher Reeve and Linda Kozlowski. Which kid do you think is the scariest? What else could the villagers have done? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.